Hi everybody. I hope your Monday is great. I hope you had a great weekend and got outside to get some fresh, cool air. It's been beautiful. I am starting this week with a new author. He is an author that we have actually read a lot of already. In fact, we've read all of the books that I have sitting here. Shel Silverstein is his name, and he is one of my favorites, and I know he's one of Isaac's favorites also. So I know we have at least one person who loves these stories, and I hope everyone grows to love them too. Really coincidentally, a coincidence is something that happens by chance that you don't expect to happen, something that just happens without you planning it. A coincidence is that he is also, for the third week in a row, he is the author and illustrator of all of the books that we will read today. He has a very particular, which means specific, which means basically when you see his illustrations, you start to recognize them as Shel Silverstein's illustrations because he does things in a very certain way. And that way is very simple. And he uses what I would guess is probably originally a pencil drawing with some pencil color. Sometimes there's no color in this book, but sometimes he adds a little bit of color as well. Sometimes it looks like some watercolor inside a pencil drawing, but nothing very complicated, nothing very vibrant like we have seen in the last few authors and illustrators' work. Everything is very, very, very simple, and that's a fun style to look at also. There's so many different styles of artwork that artists in the world create, and he has a very specific style of art. Here's the cover. The book is called The Missing Piece, and we have read this a couple of times. Like I said, it's a good one. I hope you enjoy it this time around. Shel Silverstein wrote stories a very long time ago. In fact, this book was published, which means it was printed for the first time in 1976, which was 44 years ago. And 44 is a number that is probably as old and older than most of your moms and dads. So he wrote this story a very long time ago. The book that I'm holding in my hand is not 44 years old. The way that books work is that when the author writes the story and the illustrator does the pictures, they combine those things in what is kind of like a gigantic copy machine. But instead of making a few copies, they make sometimes thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, and sometimes millions of copies. And that's what happens with books. So this book that I'm holding isn't that old. It might have been printed several years ago. I've had it for a long time, but not 44 years ago. And if you look inside a book, you can always tell when it was written because there's something called a copyright. Here's the title page. We've talked a lot about that. The copyright is the tiny, tiny typing over here. And if you look really closely, you can always find the year that it was first written and printed. So that's always interesting to me to look at. So Shel Silverstein wrote books and did illustrations years and years and years ago. The Missing Piece. Here's the first page. It was missing a piece, and it was not happy. So it set off in search of its missing piece. And as it rolled, it sang this song. Oh, I'm looking for my missing piece. I'm looking for my missing piece. Heidi ho, here I go, looking for my missing piece. Sometimes it baked in the sun. Now take a minute and look at how simple that illustration is. There's one tiny droplet that might be a droplet of sweat, and all of the rest of him being baking in the sun is shown just by the shape of his little triangle mouth. Isn't that so interesting? It seems so simple, but the artist is able, Shel Silverstein is able to show that he's hot just by changing the shape of his mouth a tiny bit. But then the cool rain would come down. And then again, his mouth changes shape a tiny bit, and you can tell that he has had relief from being so hot when it rains. And sometimes it was frozen by the snow, and then the sun would come out and warm it again. And because it was missing a piece, it couldn't roll very fast. So it would stop to talk to a worm. Or smell a flower. And sometimes it would pass a beetle. And sometimes the beetle would pass it. So there are lots of very simple clues about how it is moving through the world while it misses a piece. Is it moving quickly or is it moving more slowly? It can't go fast, the story says, because it's missing a piece. But I think sometimes about it's missing that piece, and it's also going very slowly and not missing the little things in the world, like a beautiful flower, or like a worm that it can talk to, or a beetle that it passes and then passes it sometimes. So it's not missing out on things in the world. And this was the best time of all. Look what happened on this day. And if it were moving quickly through the world, that might not have happened, right? That butterfly might not have been able to move quickly enough to land on the missing piece. I mean, on it with the missing piece. And on it went over oceans. Oh, I'm looking for my missing piece over land and over seas. So grease my knees and fleece my bees. I'm looking for my missing piece. Through swamps and jungles. Up mountains. And down mountains. Until one day, lo and behold means like, you never would have guessed it, but listen to what happens. I've found my missing piece, it's saying. I've found my missing piece, so grease my knees and fleece my bees. I found my... Wait a minute, said the piece. Before you go greasing your knees and fleecing your bees, I am not your missing piece. I'm nobody's piece. I am my own piece. And even if I was somebody's missing piece, I don't think I'd be yours. Oh, it said sadly. I'm sorry to have bothered you. And on it rolled. So how is it feeling when that piece says, hold on a second? I'm not your missing piece. I think he's feeling a little bit sad. I can tell that not only by his expression and the shape of his mouth, but also because in the words it says that he said something sadly. And if someone says something sadly, that's a word that tells us that he was feeling sad. It found another piece. But this one was too small. And this one was too big. And this one was a little too sharp. If you look closely, you can see right here where that one is too sharp. And this one was too square. One time, it seemed to have found the perfect piece, but it didn't hold tightly enough. and lost it. Another time, it held too tightly. And it broke. That's a bit of a sad picture. It has broken its missing piece that actually fit. And now the pieces of the broken piece are just left behind. So, on and on it rolled, having adventures. That's an arrow that it meets along the way. Falling into holes. And bumping right into stone walls. And then one day it came upon another piece that seemed to be just right. "Hi," it said. "Hi," said the piece. "Are you anybody else's missing piece?" it said. "Not that I know of," said the piece. "Well, maybe you want to be your own piece?" it asked. "I can be someone's and still be my own," said the piece. "Well, maybe you don't want to be mine?" "Maybe I do." "Maybe we won't fit?" "Well..." Oh. It fit. It fit perfectly. At last, at last. And away it rolled. And because it was now complete, it rolled faster and faster, faster than it had ever rolled before. So fast that it could not stop to talk to a worm, or smell a flower, too fast for a butterfly to land, but it could sing in its happy song. At last it could sing, "I found my missing piece." And it began to sing. "I frown my niz and geese, of roam my midst and breeze, so crease my mees and bleeze my drees of frown." Oh my. Now that it was complete, it couldn't sing at all. Did you hear the silly words in that song? Oh, darn. Aha, it thought. So that's how it is. So it stopped rolling. And it set the piece down gently. And slowly rolled away. And as it rolled, it softly sang. "Oh, I'm looking for my missing piece. I'm looking for my missing piece. Heidi ho, here I go, looking for my missing piece." And off went the butterfly. And that's the end. There's actually a whole lot to think about with that story. Those are my favorite types of stories, the ones that you can really think about and come up with your own meaning in. We talked last week about reading comprehension, that big long word, comprehension, that talks about understanding the stories that we hear. And in this story, there is a very, very simple set of words. It's a simple story. And one of the things that you can take away from it and think about is all kinds of important things about being friends with people in the world. And how sometimes, right now, for example, we are all in a very, very different sort of time where we don't get to spend a lot of time with our friends. We don't get to have adventures with our friends in real life, but we are getting a lot of time to spend time with our families and to spend time doing things that we don't normally get to do when we're in bigger groups or with friends. And so this story spends a lot of time exploring that, exploring the idea that sometimes being alone, you get to see things that you never got to see when you were with a lot of people. So that's one of my favorite things about reading, again, and especially about this story. There's so much to think about in the way of being a good friend and being able to be with friends and then being able to be okay when we're not with friends. So right now, when we don't have a lot of choice about being with friends or being without friends, think about the good things about being alone. Think about the wonderful things that happened to it when he was alone. Even though he felt like he was looking for someone else all the time, when he was alone, he got to talk to the worm, he got to make friends with the beetle, and of course, the most wonderful thing of all, he got to make friends with a butterfly, which was his favorite thing in the world. So think about that. Think about the good things about spending time right now without a lot of friends. And I will see you tomorrow.